You are listening to the Why Smart Women podcast, the podcast that helps smart women work out why we repeatedly make the wrong decisions and how to make better ones. From relationships, career choices, finances, to faux fur jackets and kale smoothies. Every moment of every day, we're making decisions. Let's make them good ones. I'm your host, Annie McCubbin, and as a woman of a certain age, I've made my own share of really bad decisions. Not my husband. I don't mean him, though. I did go through some shockers to find him. And I wish this podcast had been around to save me from myself. This podcast will give you insights into the working of your own brain, which will blow your mind. I acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm recording and you are listening on this day. Always was, always will be, Aboriginal land. Well, hello, smart women, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Why Smart Women podcast. I am podcasting tonight from DY in Sydney's Northern Beaches. It's a beautiful day here. It's late winter, and myself and my good husband and Yo-Yo, who has appeared with a stuffed rabbit in her mouth. Not a real rabbit, it's a toy rabbit. We are preparing for David to go into our local hospital tomorrow. And for those of you that live in America and have got a very, very tricky hospital system, we have a very, very good hospital system. We have Medicare. Anyway, David is going in tomorrow and he is having both of his knees replaced. Some people get one knee replaced at a time, but apparently because it is we're not going to use the word painful, are we, David? We're not going to say painful, or are we going to say painful?
It'll be what it'll be.
Yeah. Get nearer the mic, though. Because it is a fairly intrusive surgery, most people get one done and then get the other done, but David's surgeon is going to do both tomorrow. So that's what we're preparing ourselves for tonight, aren't we, David?
Yeah, we are indeed.
And he's very kindly, in the midst of this pre-surgery preparation, agreed to come and chat to me, his lovely wife.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And when Annie and I were talking about this, I think that there are some elements of my experience that relate to the whole critical thinking discipline that Annie's trying to bring through the podcast.
True.
And yeah, so, just on the basis of that, Annie asked me if I'd share a couple of those perspectives, and I'm only doing so insofar as I know that a lot of people now are able to consider having surgeries like these to fix things that are wrong with joints or various other, parts of the human body. And yeah, I just thought that some of my experience might be relevant to some of you.
So you'd put it off for a number of years, hadn't you? Even though, as listeners will know, I'm astonishingly fit and amazing and go to the gym a lot and never stop talking about it anyway. And David has played a lot of sport. He was a dancer earlier in his acting career, and we had noticed that his capacity to do basic things, would you agree, was beginning to become impacted upon? Would that be right?
Yeah. And it's sort of gradually. I mean, I grew up with a self-image that was, pretty accurate insofar as that my life was very, 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 very active. I was lucky to do most of my growing up on the banks of the Queanbeyan River.
Queanbeyan, which is down near Canberra, for those of you who don't live in Australia.
And so, I mean, the nature of life itself was, it was about 1.5 kilometres, up and down hills to get to primary school.
And how'd you get there?
And I walked. And high school was a good kilometre away again. And for my sins, I would be often carrying stuff. So I played the trumpet. I used to have a briefcase that was stuffed with books. And so, look, I think life was just very, very, very active. When I went to school in Canberra, I used to ride from Queanbeyan to Canberra. I played football as a kid, and I danced, and I climbed trees, and I ran around with dogs, and I was just always moving. And what was one of those, irritating people, I guess. I was very lucky as a child. I never really got sick. I had the round of, chicken pox like everybody did, and measles, I think, like everybody did. But apart from that, I don't think I took a day off school from kindergarten through to leaving in...
Your mother wouldn't have let you.
Year 12. Well, but the fact was I really didn't have to. And illness and intervention from the medical profession was it wasn't part of my life, aside from the occasional concussion. But that's another story. And
anyway, so the knee has begun to deteriorate. And while the knee was, because David plays soccer, and while it was deteriorating, what did you do about it while it was deteriorating?
I mean, I just try and deal with the symptom itself. I mean, and because this is probably the first of the critical thinking errors that we make, and it's the what did you call it? The appeal to nature.
Appeal to nature bias.
Appeal to nature. Yeah. So, when I ever contemplated the idea of any kind of surgery to fix my needs, there were various interventions, a debridement, a reconstruction,
Reconstruction? No.
Reconstruction?
A debridement? What?
Okay, it's all right. And he's not, across the lingo of all of the... Yeah, debridement is if you've got a piece of, a flap of meniscus that's pointing in the wrong direction and causing pain, they can go in there and they can clean it up and they can trim things down. And whenever anybody talked about knee surgery, I'd sort of, limp off in the other direction as quickly as I could, because it just wasn't something that I thought, A, was necessary, and B, desirable. And so there was the appeal to nature, surgery, unnatural, it's not for me. And so...
Also that you could fix yourself.
And that I could fix myself. Yeah, so this was the other thing. So holding that idea in my head that I was never ever going to go under the knife for anything other than something that was absolutely essential, I sort of, leant in the other direction, that the only way to fix this was going to be, more and better physiotherapy. And I can't tell you how many yoga classes and lunges and stretches and all of those things that I did, hoping against all hope that this would actually fix it. When if I had just sort of, gone to radiology and had an X-ray and had a look at what was really going on, I would have worked out that that no amount of physiotherapy or massage or dry needling or acupuncture or little elastic braces that you can strap and Velcro onto your knees.
Well, didn't you also look at actually follow some influences that were knee fixes?
Yeah.
Tell me about them.
Well, 100%. Whenever you type a few words into a search engine, like exercises to fix a dodgy knee, somebody out there gets your number, and so all my social feeds then became cluttered with lots of different very compelling and limber influences, absolutely certain that the pain that I was experiencing could be fixed by this set of exercises or this regime or this little support. And again, operating out of the appeal to nature bias, yes, of course, this has got to work.
So it's also confirmation bias, right? Isn't it? It's confirmation bias, because what you want is for it to be a natural solution. And so then this confirms the belief. You go, and also they are very optimistic, the influencers, uncertain.
Oh yeah.
As we've spoken about before.
Look, and look, there's probably two kinds. One who claimed that just do this exercise regime and it'll fix everything. So they would have those snappy little social media videos, and you see someone wincing in pain, and then they're doing the prescribed exercises, and guess what? They're leaping up and down stairs and rolling around on the ground, wrestling with their children and having
playing with puppies,
having a fine old time. And look, the thing about that group and particularly the physios who said, look, just do this and it'll fix it. They were probably in pretty good shape themselves. Some of them claiming to have, recovered from 5 or 6 knee surgeries.
But they're only like 12 years old, right?
And magnificently flexible and able to, squat and roll and do little cartwheels and move like a
gazelle.
Like a gazelle. I was thinking more of a dexterous chimpanzee, sort of just scuttling across the ground. And
yeah, but that chimpanzees have their paws, no arms, legs, dragging along.
I think they call them hands.
Hands.
I think they qualify for hands.
Yeah.
Yep. So look, I actually did buy a subscription to one set of exercise classes.
And what did they make you do?
Oh, look, at the end of the wedge, it all makes sense. Like build strength and stability, develop flexibility in these places, get your alignment right, all of that stuff that we learned at acting school and the Laban technique and yoga and all that good stuff.
Explain the Laban technique.
Oh, well, look, Laban was just he was a movement theorist who described human movement in a bunch of different constant sets of definitions. So, I mean, look, he was just a movement teacher like Feldenkrais or,
But people don't know about movement teachers that aren't in the acting community.
Yeah, okay, all right. So, when you study acting at the National Institute of Dramatic Art in Australia, then you get exposed to lots of different movement theories and disciplines and practices, from Tai Chi through to the Alexander method, which is about poise, and Feldenkrais, which is about little movements that help you to get awareness with what you're doing. So look, I've done a lot of movement theory and applied movement theory, and everything that was being offered by this program that I bought seemed consistent with that.
See, back to my point, it's all confirmation bias,
that
right?
is okay. So there's the confirmation bias. But 3 years on, and still sort of suffering, and the pain's just getting worse and worse and worse.
And
worse.
what happened to you psychologically? Like, okay, so you're assiduously applying yourself to some irritating program that's been, propagated by a 24-year-old. And then you're following it. And then what happened to you psychologically when there was no improvement in the knee?
Oh, look, it's a well-worn pathway to I'm not trying hard enough.
Interesting.
That I'm not doing it right, that I'm not doing enough reps, that I'm not doing it with enough consciousness. Basically, the problem is me.
Yeah, and I think this is where, so many influencers and shysters and grifters and purveyors right across the spectrum of new age truth tellers. This is the myth that they sell, that they have the perfect problem. They have the perfect solution to your problem. And if it doesn't work, it's because you are not applying yourself assiduously enough. And it's just the most classic case of victim blaming.
Yeah.
It's the perfect model, is it not?
And look, to something that you say all the time, Annie.
Was it wise?
Yeah, of course. It was certainly borne out, and that is that. Not that I'm necessarily claiming superior intelligence, but these critical thinking errors that we make. That intelligence is no defence against it.
None.
But also exposure to it. I'm sort of aware of the way these things work. I'm aware of how susceptible we are. I mean, it's been years that you've been talking about this sort of stuff,
banging on
about it, and still in a sort of quiet and very personal way, I went in a direction with my ailment, with my injury, that wasn't constructive, and also I think if I'd kept going in that direction, it would have been quite damaging, because trying to return to strength and functionality, that was impossible given the actual state of the bones and cartilage and tendons in my knees. What I was doing to keep going, to keep playing, to keep active, was taking painkillers. And painkillers is another thing that I never really... I don't think I'd even had a Panadol until I met you.
You never had a Panadol and barely had a drink before you met me. And I'd like the listeners to know I've fixed all that.
Yeah, let me just
He's now
take
at
another
the
sip.
moment. What are you drinking? What is that?
It's a neat tequila.
Is it? It's not neat tequila. Just before surgery.
Okay, I've
Good one,
diluted
David.
it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I had never taken any painkillers, and so what I found one day was that, you know, Nurofen and anti-inflammatories, you know, using those, I'd sort of moved on to a bigger gun, which I know is not the biggest gun, but I think they call it Mobic or Meloxicam.
It's Meloxicam, yeah.
Is the one that I take, and you know, the packet says very clearly, you know, only take for 3 days. And I guess there were some weeks where I took it for more than 3 days, hoping that, you know, some more lunges, that some more work with rubber bands and those sorts of things were going to fix it.
And I think it's interesting to note that there's this context of a knee replacement, of sort of applying ideas that to... Hang on, I'm going to start that again because that was terribly articulated. We're looking at this contextually of a knee replacement, right?
Yeah.
And you had followed influencers, gone to physios, done yoga, done all these things, and then you had, you know, tried, you know, because you are not a trying person. It's quite funny. You are a person who applies yourself, and then you had found it didn't work and you blamed yourself. And of course, if we just extrapolate this out, we can look at exactly the same principles, but we're looking at people with diseases which are deadly. And they are doing the same thing. So instead of going to you know, towards science and medicine, what they're doing is they are going towards alt-med. They're going towards influencers. They're going towards naturopaths. They're going towards people that are promising them, and it's the same principle, right? They're promising them that they're going to fix it, that everything's going to be okay. And then, of course, what happens is, you know, they can die. I mean, it's terrible.
Yeah. And even now, the night before the surgery, I can still feel the part of me that is a little bit disappointed that I wasn't able to do this naturally.
And yet when we look at the X-rays, there was no chance. There was literally no chance because it's bone on bone. So you look at, you know, he very clearly said, you know, if David had been an accountant, this wouldn't have happened. But David's had a highly active life, so you know, lifestyle meets genetic propensity, and this is exactly where we are. And it's nobody's fault. You didn't do anything wrong. And yet I think it is so much in the human psyche to blame yourself. What could I have done differently? Well, you could have moved less, but that's no good. And I think all we can do is go, well, here we are now, and thank heavens for it.
Oh, yeah, and look, I do thank heavens for it, and if I have the opportunity, I'll say one thing about that before we finish. But I just want to go back to your notion of how this is not an individual story. It's not an isolated pattern. It's not just about people postponing knee surgery when they could have it, and it could improve the quality of their life.
Yep.
I do think that this story does get played out for people in all sorts of different ways, and probably the highest profile one that everybody would know about would be Steve Jobs, who was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
Exactly.
And I know how difficult pancreatic cancer is. My beloved mother passed from pancreatic cancer. So I'm not sort of being, you know, glib about this as a story, but, you know, as I understand it, you know, Jobs, who could have had any therapy in the world, opted for something that was more natural and postponed the life-saving treatment or the life-extending treatments, and it caught up with him. Which is an absolute tragedy. And you'd have to say again, to your point, there was nothing wrong with his intellect. He was highly intelligent. And Martin Bella and I actually discussed this, I think, on the last podcast about the appeal to nature bias and the how pernicious it is and how dangerous it is. All the things that are natural. Cancer's natural. Brown bears are natural. Strychnine's cancer. Strychnine is natural. It's all natural. Sharks are
natural. All deadly. So it's an absolute, unfortunately, the word natural bypasses our critical thinking, because it's like, we were immediately, it evokes images of children with blonde curls running through long grass with their lovely blonde parents running next to them in white dresses, doesn't it? All looking lovely and free.
Is that what you think of when you hear the word natural?
Yeah. Yeah, small blonde children.
Right.
Even though our children are dark,
Yeah.
I think blonde children and tall blonde parents in white outfits.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah.
So look,
No, with Labrador puppies.
So on one hand, you've got this this narrative which we call the appeal to nature, and that sometimes causes people to make really bad decisions. I think it's made worse when people develop a really fixed and somewhat idealized or romanticized sense of self.
I mean,
Well, I thought that I had been blessed with a body that didn't need medical intervention, and
luckily I never thought that.
and that would and that was the way that it would always be, and that wasn't true.
That must really puncture your sense of identity, does it?
Yeah. Look, it does, because I know that when I lie down on the table tomorrow, and one person's going to stick a couple of needles into my spine, and I'll be blanked out. And
No, that's in your arm, darling.
no,
They knock you out with an anaesthetic.
I'm not talking about that.
What?
This is what this particular anaesthetist does.
You'll be dozy before they put anything in your spine.
Okay. What, did you have the conversation with him?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, they don't just make you lie there and then go, I'm going to stick it in
You're
your
ruining,
spine.
you're ruining the point of the story.
Okay, go.
Okay, all of this stuff is going to happen. At some particular point,
You have to relinquish control.
a blade is going to, descend on my knees. It's going to open them both up. A friend of mine described it as, just incredibly violent surgery.
Who said that?
Ken did.
Oh,
Who's had both of them
why
done.
would you say that?
Well, no, finish the sentence. Violent surgery, sew you up and then get you back on your feet as quickly as possible, because that's the way through. Anyway, look, the sum total of all of these things is that I will be in absolutely no position to control any of the decisions that are made by the people who will be...
Who know some stuff.
Who are just doing their job.
Yeah.
And, I sometimes think about what is wrong with the conspiracy theorists and the people who do take a thimbleful of science and then, create a notion full of misconceptions based on those things, that there's absolutely no respect for, the men and women of science and the legacy of a couple of thousand years of really good scientific method. I think it's a miracle what is going to be happening to me tomorrow.
True.
And, even 20, 30 years ago, when you couldn't expect a prosthetic joint to last you for the rest of your life, I'm hoping this one sees me out, or these see me out. Let alone 100 years ago, surgery like this was completely and utterly out of, just impossible. It's when we think about progress and all of the things that trouble us about artificial intelligence and the internet and big pharma and all of those kind of things, I feel, for two reasons, I'm on the brink of having a modern day miracle with what is going to be happening tomorrow. But the other thing that I do notice, that I'm very aware of, is that I'm only able to do this because
of me, because she's married to me.
Because probably. Mm. We've been paying health insurance for God knows how many years.
True, it's true.
And so that that makes it possible for this to actually happen.
You get to pick the doctor and pick the time.
I can't imagine. Well, and even so, picking the doctor, picking the time. Mm. It's still, more than $10,000 or $12,000 that we're paying, which is out of pocket anyway. And I know that is not available to most of the people, in this country, let alone, around the world. So, talk about a first world problem. Any anxiety that I might have before a double knee replacement, it's a first world problem, and I just think I'm so incredibly lucky that it's going to be happening. So those are the elements of the story that I wanted to share today. Is there anything
No, that's good. I mean, I was going to bang on again about anti-vaxxers, but probably I'll just leave them alone.
Yeah. Well,
I do note that Dave Onegs is he's in Indonesia, in a predominantly Muslim country, banging on about, do you know Dave Onegs? Dave Onegs, who's the anti-vax mad conspiracy theorist. I'm talking about him because I had to listen to him today complaining vociferously about the Australian government and about how terrible it was, and he'd had to escape to Indonesia. And of course it is it's just hedonic adaptation, unfortunately. You know, we are unaware of the pond in which we swim, and the pond in which we swim here in Australia, especially for us who sort of sit fairly comfortably in the middle class, it is a very, very supportive pond, and we're very, very glad. Did I overdo that metaphor?
Oh,
the
no,
pond metaphor?
No, that's all right. I mean, look, you know, we live in Australia, and we're in Australia in the 21st century. It's not perfect, but of all the periods in history to be born and to have, you know, susceptibility to diseases, gravity, aggressive people, you know, dangerous animals. You know, David Neggs gets bitten by a shark. He's going to thank the helicopter that's going to chopper him to a hospital and save his limbs. And whatever drugs they put into him in order to keep him alive, he'll take those if life goes in that direction. I don't wish that on him, of course.
And of course we, you know, I do note that it is very, very easy to get caught up in the world is a mess at the moment, and we do know there is absolutely it's
messy.
It's messy. There is no two ways about it. There's no two ways about it with American politics and what's going on in the Middle East, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, of course it's messy, but I think it is very easy to lose sight of the fact that for many of us, yes, at a distance it is messy, but we should not lose sight of the fact that for us, in certain environments, we are in a world where if we need to, we can get medical help. We have a flushing toilet. You know, I can turn the electricity on and off when I want to. I can cook things. We're very lucky.
And look, let me see if I can land a thought, and you tell me whether this actually works. You know, not only individually, you know, do we have flushing toilets and running water and, you know, someone looking after keeping the lights on at night.
Antibiotics.
And, you know, fixing the roads.
Vaccines.
All of that stuff.
Yeah.
Not only do we get the benefit from that, but we also get the benefit from living in a collective where that is everybody else's experience as well.
Yep.
That most of the people that we will come in contact with every day not suffering intolerably, you know.
Yeah.
They're not so...
They're not mad either. Mostly they're not mad.
They're not mad. They're not so desperate for food that they would take yours. They're not so desperate to, you know, to express, you know, vengeance and revenge that you would fall in harm's way. There's this amazingly intricate balancing act which is our civilization, and it's working pretty well at the moment.
Well, it's working well here.
It's working well here.
It's working well here.
And I do think that when we actually acknowledge that we are, you know, given you know the infinite possibility of human experience, given the fact that where we are now is okay, then I think that does release us to be kinder to everybody that we come in contact with every day. You know, we can look after other people.
Yeah, we can.
In meaningful ways.
Yeah,
and
true.
I think we're lucky for that too.
Yeah. So on that note, to my listeners, thank you so much for tuning in today, wherever you are in the world. I'm sure that all the listeners wish you well, David, on your knee replacement journey. We will catch up again next week, and in the interim, stay safe, stay well, keep your critical thinking hats on. See you later. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to Why Smart Women with me, Annie McCubbin. I hope today's episode has ignited your curiosity and left you feeling inspired by my anti-motivational style. Join me next time as we continue to unravel the fascinating layers of our brains and develop ways to sort out the fact from the fiction and the over 6,000 thoughts we have in the course of every day. Remember, intelligence isn't enough. You can be as smart as paint, but it's not just about what you know, it's about how you think. And in all this talk of whether or not you can trust your gut, if you ever feel unsafe, whether it's in the street, at work, in a car park, in a bar, or in your own home, please respect that gut feeling. Staying safe needs to be our primary objective. We can build better lives, but we have to stay safe to do that. And don't forget to subscribe, rate and review the podcast and share it with your fellow smart women and allies. Together, we're hopefully reshaping the narrative around women and making better decisions. So until next time, stay sharp, stay savvy, and keep your critical thinking hat shiny. This is Annie McCubbin signing off from Why Smart Women. See you later. This episode was produced by Harrison Hess. It was executive produced and written by me, Annie McCubbin.